Hello and welcome to this lesson on Azure Disks. In Azure we have three types of disks: OS disks, data disks, and ephemeral disks. Ephemeral disks depend on the VM series and size and is tied to the underlying physical host. When a VM is migrated to a new host, we will lose this kind of data, so ephemeral disks are most suitable for stateless workloads and as a scratch disk for big data and video processing. In Azure, disks are automatically encrypted with storage service encryption, which is completely managed by Microsoft, including the encryption keys. If we require OS-level encryption so that Microsoft itself cannot see the disk contents, then we can enable Azure Disk Encryption, which is discussed in another lesson. Before the advent of managed disks, there were also unmanaged disks, which were tied to a storage account and persisted as page blobs there. These still exist for backwards compatibility, but when we talk about disks, we always mean the newer managed disks. Note that there is no SLA attached to the disk itself, but the SLA is a product of the SLAs of the underlying storage and the VM. For illustrative purposes only, I provide a table on this page so we can discuss some performance characteristics. Bear in mind that this data changes often, so this table will be quickly outdated. But what you can take from this table is that we have roundabout 4 disk series. The Ultra disk is the newest kind of disk. We can roughly say that the costs are cut by half each time when we go from premium SSD to standard SSD to standard HDD. You might also want to remember for the exam that the max IOPS number for a standard HDD is at around 2000 IOPS. Usually, Microsoft is not so obsessive about these numbers in exams as you might expect from AWS, but this number could be featured on an exam. The performance of your actual disk also depends on the disk size. Here's another illustrative table that shows roughly how performance grows with the size as an example of a premium SSD. We want to close out this lesson on the topic of how to resize a disk. In Azure, we can only upsize but not downsize OS disks. However, we could create another OS disk and then choose the Swap OS disk action. To resize a disk, we must first detach or deallocate the VM. The actual steps for downsizing a disk are: first, we must decrease the partition size on the OS level, which usually involves tools like disk management on Windows or Resize2FS on Linux. Second, we must decrease the disk size in Azure from the disk resource plate. These were the steps for downsizing a disk. The steps for upsizing a disk are reversed. So we would first increase the disk size in Azure and then at the OS level. If you want to gain more hands-on experience with resizing disks, then follow the tutorial links. Okay, so that's it for our lesson on Azure Disks. Let's continue to the next one. Bye bye.